So Lagos has a heritage and a tradition of an active commercial center that nobody, certainly not anybody in the last 20 or 30 years, can take credit for.
What motivated you to run for the Lagos Gubernatorial? Why not any other office or position?
We can always keep making the case that someone else should do it. But if the solution is to get people who have a desire to do the right thing, have the capacity to do the work, and are keen to do the work, if the way to where we need to be is for people like that to be in positions, then those guys need to step up and offer themselves for service.
Are you aware that you're not the only one who has the resolution to transform the way things are going in Lagos? What are the ways or what are the things you currently do today that keeps you in touch with the plight of the common man in society?
The past 2 or 3 years have been very difficult years for most people. The average citizen is so severely stretched. Nobody in Nigeria of today should make the mistake of thinking that they have any voter in their pocket. See, something can be in place for 50 years. The day it's going to change is one day. It may look like it will never change, but the day it's going to change is one day it will change. This idea of anointing a governor for Lagos. If the kingmaker of Lagos called me into his living room and said that you are the one that we want to use for you, I will not accept it.
Why?
Because
Hi, FD.
hey, Olusola, how you doing?
I'm very well, sir.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. I'd been meaning to ask you, what's it like being a Harvard-trained, uber-successful accountant who's reached the apex of his career?
I don't. Is that me I described?
Feels like it.
I don't know. I mean, it's not something that one thinks about, right? And it's not something that happens in one day. You just do what you do, and one thing leads to another, and you build and build, and then someday somebody describes you the way you've just described. But what I will also say is that I think that one continues to learn and continues to grow, and as you develop in your life, you develop in your career, one always should find new opportunities for growth and new ways of developing oneself. So if I think about myself, and I think about the trajectory of my career, and where I am today, I am still in that growth phase. So I had a long private sector career. I'm now in the public domain, active in politics. So I think one should always continually be growing and experiencing new things.
You keep evolving.
Yeah.
And keep opening up new layers
Yeah.
or to your person.
Yeah.
So you've already defined the two most important sections of what you represent. That's, you said you've had an amazing time building a career in the professional world,
Mm-hmm.
and now in the public sector.
Mm-hmm.
So I think before I go public, I want to start private.
Sure. Why don't we do that?
And just a little bit of an inquiry into the type of person that Funso Doherty was before all of the limelight. I like to put it that way. Because you had an interesting journey. By the way, you went to the famous King's College. Feels like so many great people attended King's College. I attended a very interesting school and a very popular and iconic one, Baptist Academy, by the way.
Okay.
But to be very honest,
Iconic school, yeah.
I'm always very jealous of KC Old Boys.
I don't.
You guys seem to have so many success stories out of that school. But if I were in the room, or if I were a fly on the wall on a typical day, seeing a 15-year-old Funso grow up, what would I have seen in that room? Have you always been this measured, slow to speak type of person with a very reticent persona, or were you a different type of person as a kid?
So I would say that I probably was never the loudest person in the room. And so from that perspective, you wouldn't say I'm dramatically different from what I was as a teenager. But I have always been sort of this person who has a very strong sense of my own opinions about things and what I think is right and what I think is wrong. And so I've always had that ability to challenge things that I feel is not right in my own way, which has always been not the loudest way, but an effective way nonetheless. So that has not really changed. I think that, academically, I was fortunate. I never struggled academically. So, progressing through and attaining, acceptance, admission to the schools that I went to and all of that were never really an issue for me. I was also, but I wasn't a bookworm. I had an active social life.
Oh, really? It's hard to picture that, though.
And if you ask my friends, very many of them around, they'll tell you, I had an active social life in secondary school and in university. I was the president of a social club in
No way. University of Lagos, huh?
Yes, I was the chief of ABC club in University of Lagos.
Okay.
And so, I
I'm trying to imagine you on some baggy pants back in the day.
So we did it all. The narrow pants, the baggy pants, the white tape jeans, the red tape. We did it all.
Interesting. Not every time do I get the opportunity to sit in front of someone who has seen all the 9-12 yards in the private sector. You rose up the corporate ladder so fast and so well, up to the point of becoming the CEO of one of Africa's biggest pension funds, I'll put it that way, ARM Pension. Right? And there's so many questions I'd like to ask.
Sure.
With respect to your journey rising through the corporate ladder. Because a whole lot of times, I think that the average entrepreneur is likelier to get answers to their questions faster than a burgeoning chap who is trying to grow in the corporate world. I'll give some context to that.
Yeah.
So, more often than not, perhaps with the paradigm shift happening through the digital age in this day and age, you are likely to find more and more entrepreneurs picking up a podcast mic to share how they got here. But many times, you are less likely to find career professionals who have gotten to the apex of their careers picking up a mic to actually share. It feels as though there are more entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs asking their seniors more questions than career professionals asking questions these days, to be honest. And I think that one of the goals with Echo Podcast is actually to bridge that gap. And so unlike what people might think, the Echo Podcast is not primarily aimed at just entrepreneurship. It's in all things thought leadership. And there's also thought leadership within the corporate world. And so I said all of that to say that I want to ask some questions that I feel will be extremely beneficial to some young chap who's trying to rise through the ranks just like you. Because not everyone has got that entrepreneurial grit. And they need more people to look up to and more people who will share their playbooks and possible blueprints on how they got there. And so I want to understand what your foray into the world of accounting was like. Was that what you studied at school? How did you land your first big role with Otto Anderson, which is actually a very notable firm, for example? Yeah, so I'd like for you to talk me through that because I know before you came back to Nigeria, also patriotic, you were doing incredibly well out of the shores of Nigeria. So what brought you back? Could you talk me through all of the things that happened, all the expected and unexpected things that led you into becoming that star boy in the accounting space?
Okay. How long did you say you have for this?
You have as long as you need. I know the question is as long as it gets also. And just before we get back to that already riveting conversation, it's a very good time to kind of remind you that you have a role to play to ensure that this episode of Echo reaches more people simply by ensuring you like this video and also go a step further to subscribe to the channel and also turn on post notification. So you will be the very first person to know when next we drop a jaw-dropping episode. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the gist.
So there's a lot in what you've asked. So I think that it is to pick up from where you started off from. I think it is true. I agree that you would likely find more entrepreneurs making a case for themselves or putting themselves out there than you'll likely find, someone rising in the corporate world. That's probably true. And you'd expect that, right? Because an entrepreneur will need to be selling himself and projecting himself and so on and so forth and so on. So that to some extent is expected. But I'll say even in the corporate world, people are of different types, right? So you have, those that are that will play by the book. You have those that will challenge the conventional wisdom. You have entrepreneurs inside corporations as well. And you can think of them as the entrepreneurial people within the context of the corporate world. And we rely on them and we depend on them. Because if you don't have those types of people, the organizations can become quite staid and, not move with the times, which you need. But coming back to the question about my own journey, yes, I did study accounting. That was my first degree. And I studied accounting at the University of Lagos. And my first job was with Arthur Andersen, as you've said. And how did it come about? I was in class one day, and this may show you the difference between Lagos of then and Lagos of now, or Nigeria of then and Nigeria of now. I was in class one day. I think it was either maybe early in my 400 level. And when the teacher finished or the lecturer finished his class, he said that, there's some people here who are from Arthur Andersen. They are doing recruitment, and anybody who's interested should go and write the test. And a bunch of us, when we finished the class, went and wrote the test. And that was the beginning of it. And just from that test, we did interviews. I did about three in the first instance, then another 3, ultimately about 8 interviews. And ended up with my first job in Arthur Andersen.
How old were you at this point?
So, 22.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
22. And that's where I started from. And then I built from there. I knew I didn't want to make a career in practice as a chartered accountant. So,
why though?
Well, I just did not. So I knew I wanted to do the professional exams because I studied accounting, and that's what you do. You become a chartered. You become a chartered. I did that. But my interest was more in the finance world rather than pure accounting.
Okay.
And so that's why I made that transition at the time. But I felt it was important to have the foundation of the professional exams, which I did. And the opportunity, once I completed that, almost at the same time, the opportunity then came to join a young organization that was starting off in the asset management world, the investment management world, which was in embryonic form in Nigeria at the time.
Yeah.
Basically didn't have any pure asset management companies. So, but the Guaranteed Trust Bank Group then, which the bank was maybe 3 or 4 years old at the time. The bank was established in 1991, and what we're talking about now is 1994. So it was a young bank, but already succeeding. So they were setting up this subsidiary, which was an asset management subsidiary, which was called ARM, Asset and Resource Management Company at the time. And so there was an opportunity to join it at inception, part of a young group of people just starting out. It was like an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah.
So it was entrepreneurial, and we got it off the ground, and it's what it is today. But I was there for about 4 years or 5 years before going to business school.
So you were one of the pioneer?
Yeah, I was one of the pioneer team of about 5 people.
Wow.
Yeah. We started in mid-1994.
What was it like getting it off the ground?
Well, a challenge.
How much support did you really get?
Well, it
from
was
the
a
parent
challenge.
company?
It was a challenge because so if you know about what was going on in the industry at the time, this was not too long after we had something called the finance house crisis. You may not know this, but this was a time when we had a bunch of organizations which came out. They were called finance houses. So they were doing something that looked like savings and loan business, and a bunch of them failed, and people lost money in those organizations. So we were essentially building this business maybe a couple of years after that had happened. So it was a bit challenging, right? And it was also a new area. So we were managing maybe the first, if not the first, certainly one of the first mutual funds in this market. So people did not even understand what the idea of a mutual fund was. So you tell someone to come and invest in a mutual fund, and say, okay, what is my rate of interest?
Up until this stage.
It's a bank deposit.
Yeah.
So you have to do a lot of education and all of that stuff. So it's challenging, but it was exciting for me as a young professional. And I would say those 4 or 5 years that I spent there before going on to business school, where I learned a lot and I grew a lot.
But how did you navigate the transition from accounting to investment management? Because they might look similar to someone on the outside, but by the time you get into the nitty-gritties of both worlds, you notice there's quite a lot of...
Yeah. So yeah, they're not the same thing, but those skills are quite transferable.
Okay.
Particularly for young people. And because at the heart of investment management, and I started off on the technical side, right? So I was a portfolio manager and all of that. So on that side, a lot of what you do is understanding what make companies tick, why companies are doing well or not doing well, and essentially doing analysis to determine what is going to be a good investment and what is not.
Wow.
And a lot of that has to do with understanding the financials of a company and how they are put together, and are they making money or not making money and all of that. So some of those skills are transferable.
So when we're making a decision to go to Harvard, how did you pick the specific focus of your MBA in the end?
So Harvard actually does not have a focused MBA. Harvard's MBA is what's called a general management MBA.
Okay.
So they don't do MBA finance or MBA strategy or whatever. No, the Harvard MBA is the Harvard MBA.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but what you can do is, because it's a 2-year program, what you can do is in your second year, you can pick courses
to specialize in
your area of interest to kind of tailor your MBA to wherever it is that your interest is. Right. So it's a general man. And I knew that I wanted to do the general, because actually that was an active choice that I made. Right. Because typically people who are coming from finance might go to a school like Wharton, which has a very specific finance focus. But I insisted that I did not want that. I wanted to go to Harvard, which had a general management MBA, because I wanted a broader, generalized.
Were you already setting your sights on the CEO position sometime later?
That was already from secondary school. I was already doing that.
Interesting. What would it have mistaken you for an ambitious corporate professional? So how did that come about? Was it when you were done with Harvard, you came back to Nigeria?
Yeah. So when I was done at Harvard, I joined Goldman Sachs.
Wow.
So I worked with Goldman Sachs in the US. And then I moved on from Goldman Sachs to join PNC Group as a vice president in Pennsylvania.
At what age?
So I was probably about 34 at the time.
You were VP at 34.
I mean, it's not unusual. I wasn't like the first or anything there. It's not unusual in that
climb.
Yeah, it's not climb.
But for us here, it's such a big deal doing that over there.
Yeah, because vice president there and vice president here are not quite the same thing.
Yes.
Yes. So it's you're senior manager, but there are many vice presidents. It's not like there's some vice presidents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What was your focus? VP what?
No, it was in the wealth management business. So I was in that line. So I was, we were managing portfolios for individuals, for private foundations, charitable organizations, those kinds of things. So it was in the investment management area. I just carried on in the investment management area. And it was while I was doing that the back here in Nigeria, the pension reform process was going on. And as a result of that pension reform process, a new law was passed called the Pension Reform Act of 2004 at the time. And so what that law did was to essentially create the industry or recreate the industry to say that organizations that are managing pension funds must now be set up specially for that purpose. They must be licensed by the National Pension Commission for that purpose. And they must focus on doing that. So it's almost as if the industry was sort of rebooted, right? So I was invited to come back and help establish one of these new entities at the time, which is what was now ARM Pension Managers. Now, ARM Pension Managers was, there were about 3 or 4 institutions that came together to set up that entity. Guarantee Trust Bank Group itself was one, the assurance business. Africa Reinsurance Corporation was another. Africa Reinsurance Corporation is a pan-African reinsurance company. It's like a multilateral insurance entity. And then ARM itself. And then we had a staff investment trust, which was where I participated in the ownership of the business as well. So I was asked if I would come and do this, and we had discussions back and forth. And ultimately, I decided to come and set up that business.
And you were offered the position of CEO?
Yeah, I was CEO, and I also had an equity interest in the business.
So how did that feel?
I mean, it was exciting for me actually, because there was an opportunity to deploy skills that I had built, experiences that I had gotten in a now domestic context. Bear in mind, when I left Nigeria, it was always my intention to return.
Oh.
So it was never one of these things that, I'm going and I'm going.
Why though? Why leave?
Because you have
order and sanity.
No. I mean, so Nigeria today is not the same as Nigeria then, right? Sure. So it's a different environment.
So we're talking how many years ago now?
So I first left in 1999.
Okay.
And so what we're talking about now, my return was around 2005. So it was about 6 years after I left.
So 20 years ago.
Yeah. So about 20 years ago. Yeah. So, so that was always kind of the intention. And, for me, here was an opportunity to help build an industry using skills that I had and I had developed and in my own area of professional capacity. And really it was an opportunity to transform that landscape. And in fact, that landscape today is transformed. If you think about the pension industry today, that industry probably has about close to 20 trillion, right, in assets. It didn't exist at the time, right? So this was, you can imagine, and we could foresee that.
And so looking back now, you must be really excited at how much you've been able to accomplish. From your small space and the ripple effect it created.
Yeah, I think so, because a lot of what we see, a lot of the domestic capital that is being used today is the money within that pension industry, right? Which didn't exist. We didn't have that pool of domestic capital, right? If you think about it. And bear in mind, it was also an opportunity to shape what was going on, because everything about the industry was new. The law setting up the industry was new. The regulator, the National Pension Commission, was just established. The operators themselves were just established, right? So, and then it was not something that the market had familiarity with. So we were almost like kind of pioneers in that space. And, I have to say that that's one of the examples I will point to where, at least in the early days, the regulator and the operators worked quite well collaboratively to establish and set on a solid footing, an industry in a way that, very often you find sometimes a combative relationship between regulators and operators, and we didn't have that in the early days, right? We understood that this was something that was important. We understood that there was a lot of sensitivity around pension issues. It was important to get it right, and we sort of worked together. And I mean, I am thankful for that time because I also had the privilege, actually, of serving as the chairman of the operators. That was the elected chairman of the Operators Association, which is like the industry association on the operator side. So I had I interacted with the regulator a lot and as the leader of the operator side. And also with like the National Assembly and all of that. So it was quite a rewarding experience, I'd say.
Someone hearing you talk about all of this might feel it was all rosy. But I think I've been around the block a bit and I've built a couple of things from my own small space to know that leadership isn't all positive or positive vibes. It means many more things. And so you must have had some very tough challenges, particularly as someone who was coming from a much more organized climb. I put it that way. And so I think the final question I'm going to ask you with respect to your professional career is going to take two forms. All right. The very first one is, and you could just do it to answer both at once. The very first one is, how did your international experience translate in your leadership role when you got back? Right? And then the second angle to that question would be, what were the toughest challenges that you faced in this role? And how were you able to navigate it? And how much of that international experience helped you in the midst of those challenges? Because operating in Nigeria is very different from operating anywhere else.
Yes, that's true. Operating here is different from operating elsewhere. But remember that my own background also was not, I had worked here, a fair bit before going to the US. So for me, it wasn't like somebody who was just transplanted into a place they had no understanding of. So that helped me. But to your question specifically about the international experience, I think one of the things that provides is that sometimes when you're in a market like ours, which is a developing market, we call it a frontier market, if this is the only market you have, right? Then it is the things that you've seen in this market that will shape your attitude to things, that will shape your understanding of things. But having the opportunity to have operated in a much more developed, a broader market, you see different things. You see things that operating sometimes in the way in which they ought to operate. We have them here, but we're not there yet, right? So you can see if we grew what we had here, and if it were working right, what would it look like, right? So that gives you that in that frame of reference, right? So that you're not benchmarked to local standards. You see mirrors of possibilities. Yes, you have a sense of what could be and what should be and all of that, right? So that context is very important actually, because then when you come back and you are working with people, working with professionals, and setting goals, setting standards, including ethical standards, including standards for integrity. That context is important, right? And maybe I should give you a story to illustrate this. One of the things that we did when we first came back and we're setting up this thing in the early days, we're setting up the facilities, buying technology, and all of that stuff, right? So we were I had somebody who was, working on the IT side, that's information technology side, and some of the stuff that we needed to procure. Of course, we had a lot going on, so I delegated it. And just said, just keep me informed, let me know, and all of that. So he went through the process and came to me at the end of it and says that, they've gone through a process, they've selected a vendor and blah, 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 blah. And of course, I'm dealing with very many things. I said, okay, sure. That seems reasonable, fine. Where is it?
Fidelity.
Go ahead. So he goes ahead. And not up to a month later, I walk into my office and there's an envelope on my desk. So I open the envelope. And what do I find in the envelope?
Tell me.
It's an invitation card to a wedding. Who's getting married?
The vendor?
The vendor.
And the recommender. No way! So right under your nose, he hooked his fiancée.
Yeah.
With.
Yeah. So I called him and I said, no. He said, oh yeah, that. I said, but you know that this is not on, right? No one says you can't have relationships. No one says you cannot even have relationships with people who are maybe doing business with the entity. But for that to happen, you must disclose it. Right? And then you have to either recuse yourself from being the person making that decision and let somebody else make that decision, having disclosed.
Yes.
Right? What I found was that not so much the specifics of it, but what I found was that this sensibility that this is not quite kosher was not as well developed because it's something that seems pervasive in this environment.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So sometimes people are doing things in this
because
environment.
It's modus operandi.
Yeah, and they may not even know of, or that awareness may not be as developed as it ought to be. Right? So I just use that as a small story to kind of illustrate. I hope it,
and such were the kinds of problems that you had to face.
So that was just one.
And deal with in the early.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the other was getting the companies profitable, right? Because the first couple of years, we're making losses. We're out there trying to build this thing.
So how were you able to steer the ship towards profitability?
Well, it's just part of it is resilience. We knew that if we continue doing it, we'll get there because of the way the industry was set up and all of that. But you needed to execute. You needed to have the staying power and all of that. And we need to ensure that the industry was stabilized. That was the most important thing. If we stabilize the industry, then, the players reasonably would be profitable. And ultimately that we got there. Some of us got there before others, but, we got there.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. That's good. The history is definitely going to be kind to all of your efforts in making that happen. You made a couple of statements that totally resonated with me, where you talked about how it was good to check the international standards to see what's possible and what's attainable. And it actually spoke a whole lot to me because for me, I think every time I'm out of the country, something creeps up in my mind. And as someone who is very passionate about nation building, very passionate about Nigeria becoming much better than it currently is, I'll just say, as someone who's passionate about sub-Saharan Africa in general, when I see things as little as maybe a more developed clime having a system that works, and I'm not even talking about the complicated economic systems or anything, maybe something as little as walking into an airport restroom in Hamad International Airport, Qatar, and seeing the cleanliness, seeing, I'll give you a very funny story. Let's do story for story. Yeah. Something very interesting happened, right? One of the first times I was out of the country, I get to Hamad International Airport in Qatar. Okay, I was taking a connecting flight to another country, right? And the moment I got into the airport, I was to wait. We had a layover before the next flight. As I walked into the restroom was as neat as the one in my house. It wasn't something I was used to because over here, the public restrooms don't look that way. And after a while, I thought I was dreaming a bit. Got there. The queue wasn't long because there were several restrooms in and around the airport, as big as it was.
Yeah.
And when I was done, guess the next thing that piqued my interest. As I got out and I was trying to clean my hands and use the dryer and many more things, there were security guards positioned in and around the entire restroom. And as I was going through the security guards, I was waiting to hear Chairman Alfana, anything for your boy. And the moment I didn't hear anything, past the first guy, the second guy, I almost stunned to give one $20. Like, yo, what's happening? Aren't you guys going to ask me for anything? And I said all of that to say that the exposure that you had playing in the big leagues, whatever the position might have been, okay, must have done something in you. And it must have forged a consciousness of what is possible on your inside. Yeah. Now, I said that to bring home to your current reality. When I'm talking Nigeria, when I'm talking nation building, when I'm talking what's possible and where the vehicle of this country is going, there's a whole lot that can be done better. And we all know that. Every single person listening to this episode at this moment knows that Nigeria is not where it ought to be. But there's that, but then there's also you. And I want to ask something that, in my opinion, could baffle quite a lot of people.
Yes.
You've had what you call not just considerable success, but for some people, overwhelming success. You built a very impressive career. You've risen up the ladder. You've become CEO. And I mean, you're doing great. And at your age, for so many people who have lived the dream, for them, their goal is to retire in perhaps their hometowns or retire at one corner of the world and look back and say, I did excellent. But for you, different seems to be the case.
Yes.
And so enters your desire to transform Nigeria.
Yes.
I just have one simple question.
Yes.
Why can't you sit on your couch?
It's a very good question.
Sip your cocktail or mocktail. Watch your children enjoy life. Watch football. Do everything that you enjoy doing. Explore all of your hobbies. Tour the entire world with your beautiful wife. Why do you have an interest in taking Nigeria and, very importantly, Lagos State to another level, like you call it?
Yes.
So what informed Funso Doherty's desire to go into public service?
Okay. Thank you. So, very good question. There are two elements to that question that you've asked. I'll address them separately. The first is, why not look forward to retirement and sit down on your couch and so all that stuff, right? Which is the retirement question. Not that I'm old enough to retire. I'm 57 years old. but I understand the question. So the whole notion of retirement, I think, to me, almost like an olden days concept, right? Because what I think increasingly we will see is people doing different things at different stages, right? And also from my family background, it's not something that is so, I saw a lot. My father was a medical doctor. He ran his practice to the age of 83. He was going into the clinic every day to the age of 83. Then he eventually retired at the age of 83 and then passed on at the age of 93. So he lived for 10 more years. So that's kind of maybe the role model that I also have in terms of basically keeping busy, keeping active, and so on and so forth. But more to the question around why the transition into public service.
What motivated you?
So, when we started this talk, I talked to you about how you do different things at different points in your career, and you grow and you develop. Beyond that, I think one of the things that I found in the public and the private sector over time was that So a lot of what we do in the private sector rests on a foundation. That foundation is a governance foundation, it's a government foundation. And it was clear to me that a lot of the things that we struggle with as a nation, as a people, stems from the fact that our leadership essentially has not risen to their responsibilities and to the trust that's reposed in them. If you think about our nation in whatever field, whether it's in business, whether it's in economics, whether it's in the larger society, there are many, many, many countries that you can point to that do not have a fraction of the natural endowments that we do. And this goes back decades, you might even say centuries. What makes the difference that transforms those natural endowments to a high standard of living of the average citizen at the end of the day is the leadership and the management of those resources. And that's where the ball has been dropped. So it just became increasingly clear to me that in order to fix most of what's going on, you can't fix it at the level of the private sector. Because the private sector sits on a foundation of governance. If you're running a private sector entity and you think you're doing well, if governance is not well run, right, that illusion of doing well will remain an illusion. Let me give you an example. If you are here and you're running a bank and you think you're successful running a bank, right? And you're growing your bank, your profit this year was 100 billion, next year is 200 billion, the following year is 300 billion. But then in the fifth year, your currency goes from 200 or 300 to 1,500, right? That your entity in real terms has just shrunk overnight by about 60 or 70%. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So you may be doing the greatest thing in the world in the private sector, but the governance layer is critical. So maybe about 12, 13 years ago, I started writing about some governance type issues. And I probably wrote my first published article maybe about 12, maybe 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that interest has just continued to build. And at a certain point, got to the point where I reached the decision that, you know what, one has had the opportunity of leadership roles in the private sector. One has had the opportunity of, having served in positions of trust, in a position where you have responsibility for others. And one has, built up that capacity and that.
And so you were tired of writing about it.
Yeah, and so I thought that, you know what? We can always keep making the case that someone else should do it. We can always make that case. Why doesn't someone else do it? Let someone else do it, right? But if the solution is to get people who have a desire to do the right thing, have the capacity to do the work, and are keen to do the work, if the way to where we need to be is for people like that to be in positions, decision-making positions of trust, then those guys need to step up, right? And offer themselves for service and work to get into those positions. Because, there's nowhere in the world where they say, Olushola, we know you didn't contest for this election, but we like you. Come and occupy the office. No. The final thing I'll say on this is the following. You know, very often you see people who have had successful private sector careers. People look like me. And they are appointed into office in government, right? And they're appointed a DG of this, or appointed a minister of that, right? And that's okay. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. But very often you find that a lot of those people, they come into those appointed offices. They work very hard for 3 or 4 years. Some cases harder than they ever worked in the private sector. They finish their term or whatever it is, they go back to the private sector. Maybe things improve for a little bit for the time when they are there, but then they go back. Things go back to where they were. Why is that? Because the path to true and lasting change does not come through the appointive office. It comes through the elective office. Because it is those that occupy the elective seat that have the ability, the capacity, the institutional power, right, to make changes that are institutional and that can last. And so for me, it was very clear once I made the choice that I wanted to go into public service, that I did not want to go the appointive office route, that I wanted to go the elective office route. And that's why I've pursued the path I've pursued, and that's why I continue to pursue it.
Why not any other office or position? What motivated you to run for the Lagos Gubernatorial race?
Well, obviously I'm from Lagos, so I can't run in any other state. but in terms of the governorship seat, it was a very conscious decision. I was very clear in my mind.
Why not?
I understand the question you're asking. Why not senator or whatever, right?
Yeah, but okay, yeah. I mean, we're talking Lagos. I mean, you want to begin to effect the change from a particular part of the country, yes. But maybe why not local government chairmanship? Why not House of Assembly? Why did you go straight for the jugular?
No, so there are a couple of things. First of all, bear in mind that I had maybe a 30-year career in the private sector, right? So I come into this with quite a lot of capacity that most of the people that you will see running at those levels, right, you typically would not find, right? And indeed, many of the people you see running for governorship do not have many of those experiences, right? Not all, I said many.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Second is a very conscious decision, right? That there is a seat where you have the great potential to make the change that affects people's lives. The greatest seat in Nigeria today where you can affect the lives of people is the governorship seat. It's not at the federal, right? Because a lot of the things that affects people's lives is determined at the state level. If it's the education of people and the education that their children get, it's determined at the state level. If it is their health, it is determined at the state level. A lot of the infrastructure that they engage with on a day-to-day basis is at the state level. The transportation systems they engage with is at the state level. Whether they have mass transit or they don't have mass transit is at the state level. If their houses flood or don't flood, usually it's at the state level. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Most of what affects the lives of people happens at the state level. And the failure of governance that we witnessed and the corresponding impact on people's lives originates from and will be fixed from the state level. So it was very clear to me. And I never went for one other office to say, let me try this or let me try. I was very clear on what I'm trying to do. Because of what I'm trying to do, there's a seat that makes sense from which to do it. And that's the seat I'm pursuing.
Thank you for shedding light on that. Typically, I like to play the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
When having a conversation with people on the pod who have strong opinions about a particular thing.
Yeah.
And for you, I believe you've got very strong opinions on what true societal transformation means for Lagos.
Yes.
But the case of Lagos is a very curious one.
Yes.
Because since the year 1999,
Yes.
that gubernatorial seat has been occupied and has been running with a particular vision.
Yes.
And 26 years down the line, which will soon extend to 28 years, as we will have it by 2027.
Yes.
Many of the people who have propagated the current ideology of the incumbents believe that they have taken Lagos from what it used to be into a super commercial powerhouse and the darling of not only Nigerian hearts, but one of the most sought after destinations for sub-Saharan Africa. They like to drum their praises. And I'm not about to dabble into the veracity of that statement or not. But you, on the other hand, as with many on the opposition side, believe that Lagos is not what it should be or can be. And so for you, I would like to know, what will be the three major challenges, if you were to pinpoint, that you would say that the city of Lagos currently has with respect to performing below potential? So here's what I'm trying to say. On one hand, these guys believe they've transformed Lagos, and that Lagos, they always brandish the popular statement about the IGR, for example, about how it went from what it used to be into what it is now. And as to how Lagos is, if it were a country, for example, would be the 4th to 5th largest economy in Africa. But on the other hand, I've heard people like yourself and other people in the opposition say, well, the main metrics for human development, or what we like to call the HDI index, is not just about the internally generated revenue. There's so many other things and several other ways and metrics that can be used to measure real impact within the society. And so let's say that I am playing intermediary, or let's say I'm playing debate host to both sides. And I've heard from side one. I'd like to hear from your side. Would you call Lagos a powerhouse and a desirable destination today?
Okay. Many things we've asked in that question. So the answer is no. And I will explain why. First of all, the first thing you have to realize about Lagos is that although most people's experience of Lagos may be in the last, because we have a young population, the median age in Nigeria is about 18 years. Because most people's experience of Lagos is maybe in the last 20 years, right? So many of them don't have a context for some of these conversations. Lagos has been a commercial capital. The most successful commercial city in Nigeria is not just, it's for centuries. That's not something that came about yesterday, right? That happened in the time of the slave trade. Lagos was a commercial center. In the time when we were exporting palm oil and palm kernels, Lagos was a commercial center. Today, it is crude oil that's driving the nation because it's the commercial center. So Lagos has a heritage and a tradition of an active commercial center that nobody, certainly not anybody in the last 20 or 30 years, can take credit for. You see what I mean?
Okay.
Point number one. Point number two, we talk about IGR. Yes, because IGR has gone up. What drives IGR? Commercial activity. Right? IGR is the starting point of governance. It's not a yardstick for measuring governance. IGR is what you say, okay, this is what you've been given. The way you really then measure is what have you done with what you've been given?
So it's not the end itself, it's a means to an end.
It is the beginning starting point. It's what you took from the people. IGR is what you took from the people, the taxes that you took from the people. As a government, what we should be judging you on is what did you do with the taxes you took from the people? Don't come to me and say, I took so much taxes from the people and then expect us to hail you for taking taxes from the people. You see what I mean?
Okay.
That's point number 2. Point number 3 is that everywhere in the world, how do you judge a government? It's not a Lagos question. It's not a Nigeria question. How do you judge a government? You judge a government by the quality of life, the security and the welfare of the people, isn't it? It's even in our constitution. The quality of life of the people. That's how you judge government. Right? So it's not necessarily about whether there's a road here or there's a bridge there. Those things are good. Right? But what is the quality of life of the people? What do I mean by quality of life of the people? What education options are people enjoying? What is the quality of their education? What is the quality of their health care of the people? What are their average income levels? What is unemployment? What housing options do people have? What does transportation look like in your city? Right? Do you have a developed, organized city? Right? Are people eager to come to your city to visit, even if they don't have work here or business here? Right? And they feel comfortable across the city. These are the things that you talk about as a human development index, isn't it? Do you have water? Something as basic as water. You have it. People have access to it. Do they have to buy it from private sector operators? These are the things that you look at. So it's not about Funso Doherty coming and making the case as an opposition. No. These are standard yardsticks that are measured across the globe. Right? And if you measure those things, just in the same way that if we went to school, they will give us an exam, they will grade the exam, compare us to other people. If we do the same thing, right, the conclusion is not hard to reach.
You have many interesting ideas, and thank you for that breakdown. So I want to put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
In a bid to solve these problems that you believe are palpable, you decided to take matters into your hands and put your name in the ring for the battle for the gubernatorial race for Lagos.
Yeah.
And so in 2023, you became the ADC gubernatorial candidate to run for the elections.
Yeah.
Now, I'm tilting a little bit because I want to come back to what the issues are and what your proposed solutions to some of them might be.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the fact that you will agree with me that if you're ever going to run for any election, particularly within a multi-party system, the candidate in many cases is only usually as strong as the party that presents him. I mean, I'm talking from the standpoint of winning elections at its core.
Both are important.
And both are important, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, personally, I have a candidate-first approach. Okay? And so I need to say this just for sake of the record.
Yes.
The very first time I came or I stumbled upon your name was actually circa 2022. Okay? I've always been someone who has been passionate about the Lagos State gubernatorial race. I'm in my very late 20s, should be 13 a bit. And I can even tell you, this is very interesting. I can even sing some of the jingles of the 2003 Abiola. I'm not even joking. He and Femi Pedro's campaign song. is that serious and always been very involved in it. It's talking 22 years ago there. I was really young at the time. But from there, we had, I'm running through these for a reason, but from there, we had '07 where there was BRF. We had Jimmy Agbaje, the popular everybody loved Jimmy Agbaje. Then we had Musili Obaninkuru. And then Jimmy Agbaje stayed on and on and on. And then it almost looked like there was every year we kept on seeing Jimmy trying to get the mandate. But I'm headed somewhere with this particular analogy for a reason. So when I stumbled on the person Funso Doherty, when you were stating your case in one or two debates to be the governor of Lagos. To be honest, I think some of your ideas piqued my interest. But on the other hand, I came to yet another conclusion in my mind. And the conclusion was, okay, we've been here, done that. Bright ideas are usually being brandished about by the opposition. But the question is, do you sincerely and honestly believe that the steering of the vehicle of Lagos can be wrestled back, I'll put it that way, from the current government?
Yes. Okay.
Now, okay.
No, are you done?
No, I don't. I'm not fully done, but I think I want you to weigh in. I want you to weigh in.
All right.
I want you to weigh in because permit me to chime in.
Yeah.
Jimmy Agbaje, Musili Obaninkuru, and many other people across the last years have all perhaps at one point in their hearts thought that they one day sing a victory song, right? But it almost feels as though year in, year out, or election year in, election year out, the same ideology seems to be getting the approval of the people, at least based on the election results that we see.
Okay. All right. So, you see, I'll say a couple of things. The first thing I'll say is that, are you aware that the voter turnout in Lagos is probably the lowest in the nation? You may not be aware.
More of the voter apathy. Absolutely.
So in Lagos, we have 7 million voters, registered voters. Typically in the last election, and this is how it's been, we have about 1 million.
Yes.
So that's about 16% of the registered voters. It's about the lowest in the federation. So that tells you that this re-election that you keep talking about. And by the way, that number is coming down with each election cycle in Lagos. So that tells you that with each election cycle, the incumbent is being elected with a smaller and smaller minority of the overall registered voters. See what I mean? So it is, if you really think about it in that sense, you will probably reach the conclusion that it may not be a very popular government, right? It may not be, because many of the people are not voting. That's number one. Number two, let's just take the last election, because this is a statement of fact. It's not debate. It's not conjecture. It's not forecast. It's not estimate. If you go to INEC today and tell them, Mr. INEC, please give me the result of your presidential election in Lagos State in 2023. They'll give you. What will you find there? APC lost Lagos in the presidential election. Facts from INEC.
Oh, hi. I'd like to take a very quick break to tell you about something that has been a major game changer for not just myself, but for several other business owners as well. You know, for a while, I was actually struggling with managing finances, tracking expenditure, and curbing theft in my businesses. And all of my efforts actually proved futile until I was introduced to Budgetti. Budgetti is a financial management platform built for African businesses. And with it, you get to issue things like virtual corporate cards to your team, set spending limits, track every transaction in real time, and even get to approve requests instantly, all from your phone. Look, if you run a business, either big or small, all you have to do is check out Budgetti today. at www.budgetti.com. Trust me, it will change the way you manage your business's finances. I'll do good to remind you at the end of this episode. Anyways, let's get back to the video.
So this idea that Lagos is in somebody's grip that cannot be loosened, and bear in mind that who was running as governor, who was running as president under this election that we're talking about, is the current president who essentially holds the reins over Lagos historically. So this idea that Lagos is irretrievably held down, right, I think is a flawed idea. And I think if we needed evidence, that's one element of evidence, but I have always known this. And in fact, coming into politics in the first place, it was very clear to me that there's a path. Now, look, it is true that to succeed in an election, you need to have a strong candidate. You also need to have a strong platform, right? People need to believe that the candidate is on a platform that can potentially deliver victory. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people don't want to waste their votes. By the way, that's not a Nigerian thing. It happens everywhere in the world. People don't want to waste their votes, right? That's why you tend to have two big political parties in many systems, right? Because the opposition needs to be large and so on. So part of what we did following the last election was to review, because a lot of people told us, and I heard some undertones of it in what you said. A lot of people told us that, we liked your candidacy. We thought, you were a good candidate, but we had doubts about the platform. We did not think the platform would succeed, right? They told us this several before the election, after the election. So one of the things we did was to address that, right? And I transitioned from the ADC to the PDP, as you know. And ultimately, what you need is a situation where you have an opposition that can stand up to the incumbent. Bear in mind that the incumbent will fight in tooth and nail to keep the opposition from being in that position. You see what I mean? And anybody who says that they are not is being naive, because they are. And maybe it's expected. Maybe not to the degree that we are seeing it, but it's something that's always been the case. So, with that said, and maybe the third thing I'll say before I conclude is that remember also that the past 2 or 3 years have been very difficult years for most people. Very difficult. The average citizen is so severely stretched. Now, we're in a nice studio, we're probably you and I are probably in the, I don't know, what percent the top.
Sorry, you are in the 0.001%. I'm begging God to break into the.
So the point being that the average person is having a terrible time economically, right? And so, there's only so far that, promises and propaganda will get you.
You think the populace has been stretched?
At a point, it's not that I think. I know. I was on a radio show yesterday and a guy called in and, you could just hear in his voice. This is not somebody who is like, he's not anti-government. He's just like venting, right? But, why would it be that, he needs so much to feed one child? He actually gave me the number of what he needs to feed a child for a day. Now, why would it cost me so much to feed one of my children in one day? Right? And you may argue that the problem is not that it costs so much, but what is his income and all of that stuff. But these are all the outcomes of governance. You see what I mean? So the point I'm making is that nobody in Nigeria of today should make the mistake of thinking that they have any voter in their pocket. It will be a dire mistake. And I think even the incumbent, they know it. That's why normally it's the opposition that you say they are jumping the gun, politicking ahead of time and all. But this time it's not. It's the incumbent that is jumping the gun. And it's because we're in unusual times. So I just say that, let's wait and see.
I drawing from what you said, I'd like to ask a question. Because a whole lot of times it's easy for people who are vying for political office to act like they're really in touch with the plight of the common man in society. Whereas, on the other hand, they live in detached realities because they're here, not living with these people, not facing what they face. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that you should discard all of the wealth that you have amassed in your incredible journey as a career professional, right? But what I'm asking is, what are the ways or what are the things you currently do today that keeps you in touch with the plight of the common man in society? Because you don't live in the same geographical location.
No, but how do you know? How do you know? Where do you know I live?
I don't want to ask that here, but you could check.
I live in Surulere.
You live in Surulere?
Yes, I live in Surulere.
Okay, so it's one thing to live in Surulere. It's another thing for you to step out much often to understand what they go through. So I'm talking about your grassroots, not mobilization. I'm talking about grassroots engagement. What are some of the things you currently do? Because honestly, like I said, I'm playing the devil's advocate, but I'm also speaking like the common Lagosian who has heard so many empty promises.
You see, this is an argument that I don't quite understand it.
Tell me.
Right? So if you say you've heard empty promises, who have you given the opportunity that has failed on that promise? In the last 30 years, there's nobody. There's nobody. Have you given anybody else the opportunity that has failed on that promise? So you can't stand and tell the opposition that they gave you empty promises. It is the incumbent you should tell that they've given you empty promises, because they are the only ones that have been there for 30 years, or almost 30 years. So I don't understand the argument, right? And I'll give you another example of this. Just the other day, I was in Accra, and the gentleman that was driving me was driving past the presidential palace. And I said, "Oh, this is a presidential palace." I didn't even know it's a presidential palace. I said, "Oh, this is quite a grand building." So, yes, the presidential palace. I said, "Oh, does the president live there?" I said, "No, he doesn't live there, but he has a house there, but, this is his office as well." So I said, "Okay, so Mahama is back now, so that's the new president." He said, "Oh, yeah, Mahama is back." I said, "So I guess you guys are happy now?" He said, "Well, he doesn't know that, for him, what was most important for him was that Akufo-Addo people must go." Now, remember that they removed Mahama in the first place.
Yes.
To bring up this
an alternative, and it didn't work out well.
And now they are going back to Mahama. Right? So he said, and his point was that, we brought Mahama in 2 or 3 years or whatever. If we're not happy, we'll remove him again.
So they feel powerful.
That's where they are as a people. They feel empowered. You see what I mean? So I use that to make the case that, Yorubas, they have a saying. If a woman does not marry more than one husband, she will not know what is good, or the one that is good out of the two. Used in this context to mean, to the answer to your question specifically, that, part of the issue that we have is that because of the massive endowment that Lagos has, because of the massive resources that Lagos has, people are coming here establishing businesses, whether you like it or not. irrespective of government, sometimes despite government, isn't it? New business are being set up in Lagos every day because people perceive opportunity. It's not because of anything that government is doing necessarily. Right? Now, because of that, and because government has a lot of resources at its disposal, you can point to things and say, we have this, Zamfara doesn't have it. We have this, Kebbi doesn't have it. We have this, Gombe doesn't have it. Right? And that's true. But you are not in the same situation that they are in. You are not in the same situation. You have far more resources than they do. And therefore, we should be judging you on the basis of the resources that you have. The next thing they will tell you in answer to that is that, well, we have this great big population and all that, and so on and so forth. But actually, if you go and look at the figures, if you calculate revenue per capita, not just revenue now, but even if you compare it in relation to the population, revenue per capita, Lagos State is far higher than any other state in terms of revenue for each resident. Right? So we come back again to this point of, at the end of the day, I was in the corporate sector for many years. When we sit on boards and either you are the CEO or you are sitting on a board where the CEO is, when they present the financial statements or the results of the entity, right? If you have two CEOs that present the results of their operations, if Mr. A has higher profit than Mr. B, does not mean that Mr. A has outperformed Mr. B. Yeah. What we ask is, what resources were you given with which you generated that profit? And we'll compare it to the resources that this man was given and the profit that he generated. And even though his profit may be 10%, in other words, your profit is 10 times his own, we may pat him on the back and say, you've done a great job, right? And then tell you that if you're not careful, you will lose that job, even though your profit is 10 times his. Because we assess you on the basis of what have you done with what we have given you.
So if I get you correctly, Lagos State is grossly underperforming based off the resources that it has available to her.
Yes, for the length of time that has been managed by, yes.
Interesting submission,
yes.
Right? And I'm not going to try to act like the opposition or try to imagine how they would like to respond to that. But I want to say something.
We will do that in the debates.
In the debates, exactly. Exactly.
I'm waiting for that.
Exactly. But I'd like to say that I do not think that some of your predecessors on the opposition lane have done you much justice.
Okay.
I'll explain exactly what I mean.
Yes.
And I'm speaking once again from the perspective of the average Lagos citizen.
Yes.
Over the years, I think the three most notable names that have sprung up post Funso Williams, God bless his soul, by the way. Because I remember as a young chap in the year 2005-06, as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, his name was already being sung. And I remember when we lost him, in fact, in the eyes of so many people, he was inevitably supposed to be the next governor of Lagos in terms of popularity. We knew that. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And then in 2007, there were 3 big weeks vying for power. There was Babatunde Raji Fashola, there was Jimmy Agbaji, there was also Musili Obanikoro. Now, Jimmy Agbaje stayed in the opposition for the coming years, the coming election years. But different was the case with Musili Obanikuru, who actually vied for, I think, 2 different election years. But then in the end, it felt like he succumbed. By succumb here, I mean he felt, well, I can't beat them. I'm perhaps going to have to join them. And then, in my opinion, it brings to question many of the things that were said in the campaign speeches. If you claim that the incumbent and the ideology that he himself and his would-be successor have been parading around is not ideal for Lagos, and then you go back later to do a U-turn and then join them again, it doesn't make you look so great. And yet again, right after that, we've had cases like very recently, and I'm going to have to touch that. We had the case of Jandor, for example. He was the PDP gubernatorial aspirant in the last election. I'm sure you interfaced a lot with him in the last election. And he was PDP. And they obviously were the people that we saw as the biggest opposition, right? Before the third force of the Labour Party and the likes. And then you were in the mix of it. But the moment the election was over, right, there was another defecting. Jandor left and moved to the same party that he openly criticized time and again during the race. I want to ask you, FD, what guarantees do we have, for example, I'm talking the average Lagosian, that someone who is so well spoken like you, with incredible experience like yourself, and who seems to have a lot of fire burning on his inside to transform Lagos, will not go that route in the near future, just to settle for perhaps a lesser position that seems more convenient, and we might end up having perhaps another 30 years of the exact same ideology.
Yeah. So, I mean, I will say a couple of things. First of all, what you should always look at people's antecedents, right? So, in other words, at a certain stage, people don't really change dramatically, right? So, often when somebody comes and you go back and does when somebody of a certain age does something, if you go back and you look at their background, you will see that there might be 1 or 2 pointers to the fact that this person is capable of doing this kind of thing, as a general principle. So, so that's point number 1. So I suggest that people go and sort of, people should also do their homework about it. The second point is that, there's nothing about what I'm doing, right, that is like, that is like, because of my choice. You understand? I had a very successful career in the private sector, right? My coming into the public sector is by choice because of what I came here to do, right? So any path that derails the ability to do that is not of interest to me. One of the things I told people in the last election was that this idea of anointing a governor for Lagos, that seems to be kind of the way in which governors have come in Lagos in the past few rounds after Asiwaju.
Yeah.
That if the kingmaker of Lagos called me into his living room and said that you are the one that we want to use for the next, I will not accept it.
Why?
Because what I have in mind to do cannot be done by that route. It cannot be done by that route. You cannot. And some have tried. And we've seen an example of those that have tried going in some direction on that, and the outcome has never been good. Right? So you cannot come on a platform where you first of all kind of surrender your principal. You cannot essentially come as an agent and then want to transform into being a principal. I have no interest in being a governor that's an agent. If I cannot be a governor as a principal, I don't want to be governor. I don't have to be governor. But I understand what I can do as a governor. And so for me, that's what it's all about. Now, you see, on some level, at the end of the day, the people will decide. You know, the people will decide. And actually, the way I'm looking at 2027, we will make our case. I will make my case, as I always do. But it's the people that will decide. And if the people decide that, and I think 2027 will not be a situation where, people will, it's what candidates say so much that will convince. People will decide in their minds what they want.
How strong of a chance do you think you have?
I think I have an extremely strong chance.
And is that because of your person or your party?
It's going to be both. So I stand on the platform of the PDP. A lot of people look at PDP today and say, well, PDP is experiencing crisis and so on and so forth. I'm not deterred. I made the decision to come into PDP almost maybe 18 months ago, and I actually joined the party maybe about 17 months ago. Right? So it was not, it was a well thought out thing, right? What you have to understand is that there is a concerted effort to try to weaken PDP. And there's a reason why, right? Because if you look at the opposition landscape today, right, the countervailing force to the APC is the PDP. Outside of the PDP, if you look at the platform that has the highest number of governors outside of the APC, is the PDP. If you look at the platform that has the highest number of National Assembly members outside of the ruling party, it is the PDP. So whether you like it or not, that's the case. Even the governors that have defected from the PDP. The governors may have defected, the assembly members may have defected, but the electorate is still there. Don't assume that the electorate will follow the governor that went. Don't assume. Right? So my point being that and PDP is not speculative. We're not just starting to cobble something together that it may work, it may not work. Well, it's an established platform. Yes, there may be issues that need to be worked out, and we're moving towards our convention this weekend. But what exists is not easily created. And one of the things you'll find is that in most societies that practice the kind of political system that we do, which is what we call a first past the post political system, those systems tend to move towards a two-party system over time. And there are very strong reasons why that is. So, in answer to your question, I think that we stand a very strong chance. I am resolute and convinced about what I'm setting out to do. But ultimately, it is the people that will decide.
Are you aware that you're not the only one who has the resolution to transform the way things are going in Lagos?
Cannot be.
Because on the other hand, there seems to be a rising force of the Labour Party, spearheaded by the white cap wearing man who calls himself the architect of Lagos, JRV, right? And kudos to himself and his team. To a very given extent, they made some sort of a statement at the last election. And first and foremost, I don't know your opinion of him, but have you ever perhaps thought that to be able to break a 30-year what you call a hold or a grip on Lagos, it might take some concerted efforts or a bit of an alliance, similar to what we had in 2015, where Tinubu, Atiku, and Buhari came together to forge a union to unseat the incumbent president, who actually happened to be a part of the PDP. So here's my question. Haven't you thought of the possibility of exploring talks with perhaps another part of the opposition to maybe come together, combine resources? Because if this group is really going to be taken off, you might need a little bit more than, do I say, desire from both sides, but instead an alliance.
See, you know, at the end of the day, right, nothing is like off the table when it comes to these kinds of, you know, situations, and when it comes to politics and all of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, when the election comes around, it's almost like, see, this thing about alliance and you talk about, it makes sense. It's good. But it's easier said than done a lot of the time, right? As I'm just giving you the practical. So with the best of intentions, sometimes those things don't happen, right? So anybody who sits in front of you and tells you that their plan is based on there being an alliance, right? I'll say may not be a very serious person. You should be open to it.
You should be able to stand tall on your own.
Yeah, but that should not be your primary plan. Because at the end of the day, right? But by the time that election rolls around, there will be some alliances that, depending on how they are coupled together, you may not want to be part of those alliances if they undermine your ability to do what you want to do, right? What is needed to be done, right? So this is something that is not something that is open to like a quick fix or a quick answer. You have to be open to it. You have to, well, you know, you have to consider it, but you know, but that cannot be your primary objective. At the end of the day, by the time 2027 rolls around, we'll go to the electorate. There may be 2 strong candidates, there may be 3 strong candidates, and the electorate will choose. Let's not undermine the electorate's ability to make a choice. See, one of the things I say is that, you see, when it's time for things to change, they change. When it's not time for things to change, they will not change. Something can be in place for 50 years. The day is going to change is one day. You understand? It may look like it will never change, but the day is going to change is one day it will change. Right? So, let's give the electorate the credit that they will assess their options and they will make their judgment.
Thank you, FD. As I bring this to a very interesting close, I like the fact that majority of what you've been saying has been you stating your case and then leaving it over to the people to make their decision. So we're in a digital age that is riddled with very short attention spans, right?
Yes.
And so if I were to take, you've been CEO and therefore you must have heard several elevator pitches. You must have stumbled on people who had just a minute with you or 2 minutes with you and had to state their case in a very compelling way. And so let's say that I wanted to pick a highlight of this entire conversation. And I wanted to show part of this video to someone who would have never come across you and wants to know why you, Funso Doherty, are the right choice to steer the ship of Lagos to sustain prosperity. What would you tell such a person? Why you in the midst of other options? Why you in the midst of other well-meaning Lagosians? Why should somebody in less than 15 months from now put their thumb to paper for whatever party it is you're representing, which is at the moment the PDP? Why?
So the principal problem that Lagos has is that the vast resources which it has have been managed poorly for the benefit of a select few at the expense of most of the citizens of Lagos. As a result, you have had an extractive situation in Lagos. I am bringing an inclusive form of government. I think we need to move from extraction to inclusion. When we move from extraction to inclusion, what happens is that the benefits of governance then become translated into the people's lives. You will see it reflected in their education, their healthcare, their housing options, their transportation options, water, power, their daily living. You will see it in their daily living, not pointing to one bridge here or pointing to one road there. I am coming with a history of leadership. I'm coming with a history of being entrusted with resources. From my 30s, I've been managing billions in assets for the benefit. I've been a fiduciary for most of my career. There's no role that I've held where I have not been entrusted with assets on behalf of others, as well as people that have led in organizations nationwide who have customers, staff, offices across the nation. So you have somebody who has not just the desire, but can demonstrate a history, a character, and a track record of being faithful with what they're entrusted, and who has a strong connection to Lagos, spanning generations, and who believes that Lagos can be substantially better than it is today. And that's the case I'm making to the people of Lagos. And I trust the people of Lagos to make the right decision.
Okay. Thank you, FD. I think that was quite passionate, I would say. In the end, I'm just having a conversation. Think the decision is theirs to make.
Absolutely.
I'll keep my cards to my chest on where my own decision will be going at that point. But I want to ask you a question. Now, this is quite personal. In less than 15 months, Lagosians will gather together to make a decision on who is the best candidate to steer the ship of the state to the next level. If elected, what will be your first 100 days priority?
So there are a few things. One of the central pillars of my approach to government is to reform the government itself. Because we can address policy areas, but if we don't reform the government itself, it will be like solving symptoms, whereas the underlying problem remains. So it's going to be important for us to ensure that we address things like the conditions under which government officials work, ensure that they're reasonably compensated, but then ensure that they work for the benefit of the people. And so ensure that they're not operating with conflicts of interest, ensure that they are following the rules, ensure that they're not stealing money. If people are stealing money, we'll prosecute them. So setting that tone from the beginning is going to be an important component of what we do. And then we begin to roll out in the policy areas. I'll take 2 or 3 policy areas, some of the things that are key for us. One is that education, which ought to be free. People are still having to pay for WAEG, pay this fee, pay that levy. Education up to secondary school level should be free. Just yesterday, I was talking to somebody. Public school. It's finished. To get his testimonial, they're asking him to come and pay some money. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. That should not be. Healthcare for children should be free, including drugs. Because what you have now is I say healthcare is free, but you come to the hospital, they have to go out and buy drugs. Right? Many of them will delay coming to the hospital because they know that they don't have the resources to buy the drugs for the children. If you keep a child with a fever at home for 1 more day, that could be the difference between life and death. And by the way, we see these things show up in our numbers for maternal mortality, for childhood mortality. We see those things show up. So that will be one of our cardinal programs. In addition, children going to school, right? Transportation for children going to school should be free. Because that also is something that keeps people from being able to, I'm sure you know the numbers of, or have a sense of the numbers of out-of-school children that we have.
Yes.
Right? So that's another important component. The final thing I'll talk about is housing. We're going to move very quickly on housing. Because as you know, housing is a huge problem in Lagos. Part of what you are seeing in Oworonshoki and all of this, they are just little symptoms. The real underlying problem is that 60 to 70% of the people in Lagos live in informal settlements. And that's because the housing stock in a city like Lagos needs to be orders of magnitude substantially higher than what we have now. It's not an incremental thing of building 20 flats in one place or 30 flats in one place. No. We need large-scale mass housing. And we have a whole program around this, which has to do with the provision of the land, the finance for it, the ability to create mortgages, something we call a refinancing option, which will be supported by the state, essentially creating a housing ecosystem that enables us to scale the provision of housing at a much, much higher pace than what we have traditionally seen.
Thank you, FD. That feels a bit like you were reading out your manifesto unrehearsed extemporaneously. I think it's a pretty good sign that you know by heart exactly all that you want to say. And once again, that's left to the people to decide, not me.
You're one of the people.
But absolutely. But once again, like I said, I'm only the messenger. But I want to say something as we bring all of these to a close.
Yes.
FD, I'm going to get as real as I can. There's a wide gap between ideation and implementation.
Yes.
A whole lot of times I've seen some of the best intentioned people
Yes.
have their plans crumble.
Yes.
Because the implementation process could have been met with so much unforeseen circumstances and missed many gates.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to narrow that down to the Lagos context.
Yes.
And I'd like for you to please weigh in on this.
Yes, I will.
I like when you said that one of the first things you want to do is you want to overhaul, the public service system. So, for example, I always believe that you cannot have the society function properly if the means to making money legitimately is non-existent. So, for example, if I were in your shoes, one of the very first things that I would be looking to change would be the policing system and do a total overhaul police reforms, which is fair and is a very notable thing to say. I believe that one of our key or core or one of our problems within the whole of Nigeria is the fact that first and foremost, corruption has eaten deep into the fabrics of the nation. We all know that. But we've just found a way to also deodorize malfeasance. And I think that's just the phrase that captures it.
Yes.
We've deodorized malfeasance. The average, I think top two of the greatest problems we have in Nigeria is the issue of impunity. And it's easy for someone who's trying to contest for an office against what is currently popular to say that he wants to do all of these things. But you need to understand the current context that we have. If you're coming in as the opposition and let's say you get into the seat of power to rule a Lagos state that currently has about 90-something% of the seats in the House of Assembly. It's currently 80-something and 90-something, if I'm not mistaken.
You mean the APC?
Yes, the APC,
Okay.
yes. They currently have the vast majority of the seats within the assembly. They currently have, if I'm not mistaken, I think all of the 44 local governments are currently headed by the ruling party at the moment.
Yes.
Now, let's say you become the anomaly. You get into power, and whether we like it or not, all the local government elections will not be recontested because you were in power, because some have been done at different points.
Yes, it's a different cycle.
It's going to be a case of you against the wall. And we have seen cases of the seat of governance being made uncomfortable by the surrounding political factors, both micro and macro. How do you think you can realistically navigate that murky water?
Okay, it's a good question. So, a couple of things. First is that the process that brings a governor into place, right, will result in a National Assembly that is not of the type you described, right? Because for a governor to succeed, you must have gotten some number of votes across the board, right? So, and remember that the governorship election and the National Assembly are conducted on the same day. Do you understand? So, for a new governor to come in, it's not going to be the case that of what you described. The assembly too will become a mixed assembly at best, right? That's point number one. Point number two is that, you see, anybody who's led organizations of any size knows that there are different stakeholder groups that you must manage, right? And these stakeholder groups are not always aligned. They are contending sometimes, right? I have led large organizations, but I have also led not just organizations, I've led industry groups. Remember I said that earlier on. One of the things about leading an industry group is that you are leading a group of people whose interests are actually opposed to one another in some ways.
Yeah.
So it's actually, especially when it's a young industry group, because everybody is sort of, so there are skills, right, that are required in that context, right, of getting everybody to kind of, or substantially to move in a particular direction, even though each person may have a personal interest that is dragging in a particular direction. It's a leadership skill, is the point I'm making, right? That's the second component of it. The third component of it is that part of the reason we are looking at it the way we are looking at it today is because the monolithic structure is all we have known in the past 30 years, right? Once you have a change in the executive, the environment changes, right? Yes, the executive needs the assembly, but the assembly also needs the executive. You see what I mean? It's not as if one person has all the power. right? So part of it is managing that dynamic, right? And, look, at the end of the day, this is what governance and leadership is about. This is how it happens in democracies across the world. Why should our own be different? Why should our own be different? There's no reason why our own should be different. So people will often say to you, right, that things can never change in Nigeria. Things cannot work in Nigeria. People will always be corrupt. People will always steal money or whatever in government or whatever. I don't believe it. The private sector, when you look at well-run organizations in the private sector, where you don't have corruption, is it that the people are from Mars? No. It's the same Nigerians, but they are in a structure that doesn't permit it. They're in a structure that doesn't permit it. The rules are there. There's somebody checking to see that the rules are followed. The person at the top is not the number one rule breaker. He's the number one rule keeper. You see what I mean? That is when organizations work. Those same conditions, if you recreate them in the public sector too work. Give people reasonable compensation. Ensure that they know what the rules are. Have systems of checking whether the rules are followed. If the rules are broken, enforce consequences. Then you, who are sitting at the top of the system, be the number one rule keeper, not the number one rule breaker.
So the oil must flow from the head. Yeah. FD, I've had quite a delightful conversation. I think it was important for me to hear you out.
Mm-hmm.
I had wanted to ask a lot more professional questions with respect to your intriguing journey through the years in the corporate world. But it's obvious that your heart is currently a lot more stayed on the current ambition, I'll put it that way, to see to it that, in your words, that Lagos does even much better than it currently is. But I'd like to end with this question. That was my penultimate. So I'm at the point where I just want to ask a simple question.
Yes.
And it's a more legacy-related one.
Yes.
If everything ended today, what would you consider your proudest contribution? If everything ended right now, looking back, either in the public sector, the few years you had in that, or in the private sense, what would you call your proudest contribution? Maybe top one, top two proudest contributions.
I'll say two things.
Tell me.
The first is my family, because I think that that's a contribution to this world. And I think I've been very fortunate.
Yes. I think I should say that. I met your wife.
Yes, I'm very fortunate to have a spouse and helpmates, and 3 awesome children who
nice.
We have contributed to this world through the grace of God. So that's one. Now, I think that you can be in governance without being in government. You know that. And in the past few years, most especially in the last 2-3 years, I've been in governance, even though I've not been in government. And if you've been following my activities over the last 2-3 years, you will see that I have been very vocal about certain things that I have observed, that I feel strongly about, and I have been active in the public space, advocating, writing, in some cases going to court on certain matters, bringing attention to certain things. it's been very gratifying to actually see changes in the behavior of government as a result of some of those things when those things happen. I can give you examples.
Give me one.
I'll give you two.
Why?
Remember when the coastal road was announced?
Hmm.
That road the contract was awarded single source basis to a single contractor. There was no competitive bidding, no tendering, none of that stuff. They just awarded a contract to High Tech. I insisted that thing is not okay. A lot of people spoke out about it, but I felt it's a seminal problem because that is at the heart of our development challenge in Nigeria. Because that's just an example of a place where public resources are being used in a way that is not accountable, not transparent, and actually, in this case, in contrary to the procurement laws. So I actually went to court on that matter, and I'm still in court on it, and the appeal court. Not that I have fundamental objections to building a coastal road. It may have economic benefits, but you can't award a 1 trillion naira contract just without. You can't do that. This is how the resources of this country are dissipated. You will then observe, initially when it was said a contract was awarded, initially they said to High Tech from here to Calabar and so on and so forth. Part of the agitations that we've done, when they are now awarding Section 2, you will see that they are no longer saying single source. They are saying we are calling restricted, we are calling people to come and bid and so on and so forth. So the way they are doing Section 2 and Section 3, right, reflects.
So you mean that
this challenge.
Many of your agitations have been.
So you can see, right? That's one. Two, I'll give you an example. Another example, which is Lagos State. Lagos State has something they call Lagos City Island, Lagos Model City Plans, right? So they do plans for some of these local governments. Say, this is our plan for this local government. So they did one for Lagos Island. And I'm from Lagos Island, as you know. And that plan provided is Lagos Island. As part of that plan, they were going to do some reclamation around the edge of the island of land using private developers. The point being that will now raise money for them to do flood control on the island. That was part of a broader renewal, urban renewal plan for Lagos Island, but to start with that component. You know what I wrote? And I said, no, we can't do that. That in the first place, reclamation has major risks, so especially around the island, right? In terms of environmental risks. But secondly, why is it that on Lagos Island we must reclaim land and sell or give to private developers in order to fund flood control? Is it only on Lagos Island that we're doing flood control? Why must we sell waterfront land on Lagos Island to do flood control? Right? I was reacting to an initial draft plan, which was put out. And by the way, it wasn't exposed in the internet and all that. You had to go somewhere and go and look for the plan. But I wrote, and my letter is in the public domain. Who will go to my Twitter account will see it sometime last year. By the time they now did a revision of that plan that somebody sent to me, the revised plan has removed that component of it, recognizing it. So you can see that actually, to the point I made, you can be in governance even before you get it. And it's actually important. Because if you don't have opposition, you don't have government. You don't have democracy. Let's put it that way, right? So it's important. So to bring it to tie to your question, the way it ties into your question is to say that one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that this desire that has brought me into public service or the pursuit of public office, the fact that I did not attain the public office in my first bid for the public office has not stopped me from contributing to the governance of the state. Right? And I have remained engaged. And by the grace of God, when 2027 rolls around, we will go to the polls again. And the people will decide. But whatever the case may be, we have added value to the process.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Funso Doherty. I know it is your desire that in about a year plus from now, there will be a prefix to that name. Not that it
There's
will,
already a prefix. Mr.
not that it
It's
will,
good enough.
not that it will further give your name credibility, because I think that all of your fits have been credible enough. But then it means it will just be an icing on the cake for you. And thank you for your time. I think this has been a riveting conversation. It's been very insightful going through your mind and understanding your thinking over the past 1 hour plus. And I want to say that on behalf of myself and all of the team at Echo, we wish you well.
Thank you.
In your pursuits. And we hope that should you get the opportunity to steer the ship of Lagos State, that you will do things right. And we hope that all that you have said you will do will be done. And once again, I speak on behalf of the people that you've kept on referencing and the people who you will meet at the polls. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And it was such a delight. Thank you for a great conversation.
I really appreciate
I'm
it.
excited. Thank you so much. What a conversation. I, for one, like the fact that he really poured out his mind. And I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of yet another exciting episode of your favorite podcast, of course, the Echo Podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of this. But do not forget that you have a role to play to ensure that this podcast episode reaches more people simply by liking this video, but also go a step further to click on the subscribe button. I'm waiting. Click on the subscribe button and also turn on post notifications so you will be notified the next time we come your way again with another episode. And also go one step further by sharing this to a friend, that someone you know will love all the burning questions that I asked in this exciting conversation. And a huge shout out to our sponsors, Budgetti. Oh yes, thank you once again for your constant support, and also to our media partners, Echo Bank Business. Thank you for ensuring that this was birthed. Till the next episode, guys, it's me and everyone in the studio. Ciao.